Hello, everyone. I'm Emily.
And I'm Hannah.
And we are the hosts of the I Don't Think So podcast. Each episode, we discuss a different story, theory, or mystery, and decide if we think it's believable or if we really don't think so.
Here at the I Don't Think So podcast, we are affiliated with Flurry Sports, and we present our theories on your favorite place to listen to podcasts every Wednesday. If you like what you hear, definitely follow us on our socials at I Don't Think So _EH. Or check out our YouTube channel at IDTS Conspiracies.
Yeah. If you want to listen with a little bit of a background, check us out on there.
Mm-hmm.
Follow us. If you don't like to listen to us on there, why don't you just follow us on there? Why not? Have a little fun. Like the show. All sorts. So we are, oh my God, we're 3 weeks into May.
Oof, duh.
Yike. Mother's Day is coming up for us as we record this. Sorry, folks, we're ahead.
Mother's Day is past for
Mother's
you.
Day is past. Hope it was good for you. You know what you can do. We're still on our true crime.
Mm-hmm.
Words are really hard for me. So glad we do a podcast. Oh God!
If only you could see the actions that I'm portraying.
You can't. Sorry. What are you gonna do? But anyways, we're on true crime, and I firstly looked up my Catherine August Vivas that I talked to you about the first week. Not a ton, other than that they do really genuinely believe that it was related to drug running.
Yeah.
But they are still not certain how her husband is involved in all of it. So he's now kind of getting thrown in the mix. So that case is still going. I think 2 people arrested as of right now. It's a wild time to be on that case. But anyways, I wanted to find a case that was kind of had some twists, had some turns, had some interesting things happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the case of Carolynne Watson and Julian Buchwald.
I feel like I've heard these names before, but the story's not ringing a bell.
Good. Perfect. Would that have been absolutely, I know this story.
Or is there a different Watt or something? Yeah. No. Never mind.
Carolynne, I think there's a lot of Catherine, Carolynne, Kristen in the true crime world for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So it might be something similar. So this story takes place in Budgery, Australia.
Oh yeah, never heard of this.
So Budgery, Australia isn't a place that's really well known, really. It's a really small town. We came from a small town, real small. 200 people.
Oof,
actually it's less than that. It's in the hundreds somewhere. Which is just extremely, really located, found in Victoria's Gippsland region, which is about 2.5 hours southeast of Melbourne.
I appreciate that we describe locations, but how far I have to travel.
What do you want from me? I don't know, miles. Talk about that might be a U.S. I think it is a U.S. thing, or at least a Midwest thing.
Yeah.
But to me, it's if I'm driving, if you tell me miles,
it means nothing to me.
Well,
also because we have to drive country roads versus interstate, where it's it might take me an hour, but it's only 30 miles because I'm driving the back roads through the boonies, or I could travel 60 miles in an hour, because I'm on the interstate.
Well, and that's where they're oh, it's 10 miles. And I'm okay, 10 miles if I'm driving 25 miles an hour in town where I have to stop every block.
It's going to
take me freaking 45 minutes to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Versus the interstate, I'm going to be there in 8.
Yeah.
Speed demon. Anyways, about 2.5 hours southeast of Melbourne. So this crime kind of had some interesting twists and turns because it talked about these 2 young people and it would generate some national headlines. It's just kind of weird. So kind of a little bit about the case. The 2 people I talked about, like I said, this happened, back it up a little bit. This happened March. Like I said, so glad we do a podcast. March 4th of 2008. This involves 22-year-old Julian Buchwald and his girlfriend, 17-year-old Carolynne Watson. Don't worry, the age only gets worse. So this story is where they were about to like go on a date together. Now, Julian and Carolynne have been dating for 2 years at this point, which again only makes the age worse.
So it started at 15 and 19?
15 and 20.
Oh.
But they met in church.
Worse.
Both of them came from very religious families. And the couple had kind of started to talk marriage. So they went to church together and began starting to talk to their priest or whatever the hell, pastor, about marriage. And on this day, they decided
legalizing the pedophilia.
Legalizing them. Gross. About their grooming. So there wasn't much to do, obviously, in this area besides enjoy the outdoors. Julian's family owned a massive piece of property in Budgery that was over 1,200 acres in size, and mostly was covered in like bushland. So they never kind of ran out of places to explore.
Sure.
They were just like in love. So the morning of March 4th, Julian would go to pick up Carolynne from her home in the town of Churchill, which is a little bit bigger than Budgery.
But not much.
I mean, it has a population just under 5,000.
Okay.
So, like, comparatively.
Like your typical small town kind of thing.
Yes. Like, not a huge town by any means, but larger than Budgery.
Mm-hmm.
It's located about, like, a 20 minute drive away. And once Julian and Carolynne were together, they went back to Julian's parents' property, where they kind of grabbed all the stuff they needed for their picnic. So it was, like, a little bit of food, a little bit of like a blanket, their basket. And it wasn't much because they had a curfew of 3 p.m.
Okay.
So they had to be
back in a relatively short amount of time.
And not like a ton of time. So they still had to take Julian's vehicle to the spot because if they wanted to get to where they were going, it was a ways back from Julian's parents' home.
Okay.
So they had to drive a little bit. The area in question they were going to was located next to a waterfall and a place that they both have been to before, was easily accessible, not a problem. So most of the drive to the waterfall that morning was normal, just like two young people in love driving out to that point. At some point, Julian spotted a animal who had been gotten killed on the side of the road, some roadkill.
Mm-hmm.
And it caught his attention. So he drove a little further before finding a spot to like pull over, and he told Carolynne that he wanted to go take a look.
Yikes.
So he hopped out of the car and started walking back down the way they came so he could go
look at
this roadkill. And it was a little bit back. So you know when you see something on the side of the road and you like drive, and by the time you pull over, it's further than you think it is.
Yeah.
So that was it. So he disappeared out of sight. Carolynne had no interest in going looking at this roadkill.
Same girl.
And so she chilled in the park. The thing is like, apparently this wasn't odd for Julian.
Like, look at roadkill.
In the bush of Australia, it sounds like they collect pelts and collect meat and, like, whatever. I don't get it, but apparently this isn't odd.
Okay.
Because when I first heard this story, I was like, the fuck?
Yeah.
The man I'm marrying is not going to pull over on the side of the road and be like, look at that dead deer.
Right.
You know? So it's like, okay, whatever. So, and to her recollection, Julian was always kind of getting distracted by weird stuff like this. And it wasn't uncommon for him to go and take a look at something he'd seen while they were exploring. However, at this point in time, about 10 minutes passed, and there was still like no sign of him. Julian. So she couldn't see him, and she kind of grew concerned because he never really took this long before.
Mm-hmm. And
so Carolynne kind of started to debate with herself, like, should she go out there? What should she do? Maybe check and see if she was okay. And as she's kind of mulling over the situation, she looks up, and in her rear view, like, side mirror, she sees a figure dressed completely in black with, like, black gloves and a black, like, balaclava covering their head and face. And it looks like an unknown man at a full sprint running to their car.
That's terrifying.
Isn't that awful?
Yeah.
And before Carolynne could, like, because just think, like, you look up and by the time you see him in the side mirror,
He's like,
he was
there.
on the door.
Yeah.
So before she even had a chance to like react or lock the door, he had gotten to the car, ripped the door open, and drug her out. After falling to the ground, her mouth was duct taped and she was hogtied. Oh God! And thrown into the back seat of the car, where she couldn't see hardly anything. Still having no idea where she was going, she lay there for some time before she started to feel the SUV moving and realized that she was being driven away. The journey continued for it felt like hours until finally the vehicle came to a stop, where she was once again drugged from the vehicle and the attacker threw her on the ground. She was like still duct taped and hogtied.
Mm-hmm.
She was absolutely terrified. So she would say she couldn't really discern much about where they were, other than it was densely wooded.
Oofda.
Her attacker then would cut off all her clothes with a knife and left her completely naked. And if things couldn't get worse for her, she then started hearing the sound of digging.
Sure.
Just a few feet away from her. So she was convinced that she's moments away from dying
death,
and being buried.
Yeah, I'd be terrified of that too.
So all she could think to do was pray. So that's what she said she did. So at the same time of this happening, since the young couple had left, Julian's parents quickly kind of began to worry and notice because they didn't come home around 3.
Sure, they had this early curfew of everything and they were expecting them home.
Yeah, and again, these are two very religious people who both live with their parents and were rarely late.
Sure.
So within the hour, Julian's mother was pacing around their property, kind of immediately surrounding her home, and constantly looking down the driveway to see if she could spot her son's car turning in. Coming up the road during one of these walks down the driveway, she would notice something strange. It appeared to be sticking out of a section of the wire fence that was around the property.
Okay.
It was this little glass bottle that had a paper wedged inside of it.
Oh.
A little
a
message in a bottle.
Message in a bottle.
So she went and looked at it, and what she read kind of made her blood run cold. Now, the note had a lot of explicitives in it, and I couldn't find a perfect recreation of the note. So I will use blank in the word blank where there would be square words. So the note read, quote, "You blank couldn't leave us alone, so your son and girl went walkabout. You get Carolyn and Julian back when we finish our business in the area, but only if you behave yourself and don't blank us around again. Tell everyone they are on holiday. Don't you dare talk to the cops again, and you'll get your kids back. Blank us again, and you'll never see them again, because we'll blank the girl to death and burn her alive.
Jesus.
And the blank boy will really enjoy the blank and sacrifice to our God to pay back 180 times the hurts to us he did when we picked him up. This is your last warning. Do what we say, and the kids come back alive in good condition." What a fun little note. Yeah. Good times. So honestly, she was horrified. Can't understand why.
No kidding. Jesus Christ.
And contrary to the note's instructions, she kind of panicked and ended up immediately calling the police.
Smart idea.
Smart. Good for her. A search effort was quickly organized, with authorities starting in the Buchwald property, kind of searching there. Police knew that the search would be challenging, in addition just to how big the property was, and the terrain was really rugged. It wasn't good to walk
Sure,
around.
that makes sense.
There was a lot of side roads, there was a lot of paths, and the pressure to find Julian and Carolyn only increased when it was revealed that 10 days before their disappearance, Carolyn's family had also received a threatening note, just like the one that Julian's mother had found. The note was discovered by Carolyn's father, and it was on the front porch of their house and warned them to stay away, or the unknown perpetrator would make their lives miserable and would destroy their family. When Carolyn's father got this note, he did report it at the time, but the nothing was done. So the police basically was like, oh, it's a dark joke, or it's
Sure.
like a dark thing. It's no big deal. But obviously, after the two went missing, it was clear to police that they were
They're
connected,
serious. Yeah.
and they could tell that the notes were written by the same person because the handwriting was the same.
Gotcha.
Both seem to suggest like a prior connection between the perpetrators
And the victims.
And their families. Though it was strange since neither of them could say like they're like we're cool, like we don't have anybody who hates us.
Right.
There was also more clues in both of the notes that pointed to a potentially like creepy motivation behind the disappearances. It stated in Carolynne's family's note that they were part of some group that believed Christians to be their enemies. So, a satanic cult, if you will. Both of the notes contained like this kind of weird symbol that was soon discovered to be a sign used by a satanic cult called the Order of the Nine Angels. Or Nine Angels, I'm not sure which one it is. According to some information about the group, they were created in like the UK in the 1960s. But didn't really grow in popularity until like the 1980s. And they were known to be like very politically driven, extremist, and it was just a lot. They had established branches in several countries across the world, but it didn't seem like there was any in Australia quite at this time.
Sure.
Really what their goal and what they would advise their members to do would be to isolate themselves from society, embrace violence, and commit crimes. Also, it was a big
good things.
It was also a big human sacrifice element to their cult as well. So this bit really generated a lot of attention on the case because
it was like, especially in like you're following like satanic panic of the 80s,
and it's just like it seems so scary, and especially for two like very Christian, very religious families. They're like, my babies have been taken by Satan. So it just garnered a lot of attention. Many feared that the couple might have been taken by this cult to try and start gaining notoriety in Australia.
Sure. Start kind of like a following
as quickly as possible
by making their first sacrifice.
Yeah. Things would kind of seem to get worse because days began to pass without so much of a trace of Julian and Carolynne being found. Pretty quick, authorities weren't sure if they bought the whole satanic cult angle of the case, but they were for sure that like there was foul play involved in this.
Sure.
Investigators were worried that they would have little chance of survival based on how long it had been.
Yeah.
And it quickly had turned, from like we're trying to find them alive to trying to find them in general. Finally, after 6 days, authorities were able to deliver the miraculous news that everyone had actually hoped for. Carolynne and Julian had both been found alive.
That's crazy.
6 days following the kidnapping. They stumbled out onto a roadway together near the Alpine National Park and been picked up by a passing farmer. And it was not shocking that investigators wouldn't have found them because Alpine National Park was like hundreds of miles away from where they were taken from.
That's crazy.
It's like roughly a 6-hour trip by car.
Jesus.
Yeah. So, though the couple had suffered some like serious sunburns and had cuts and blisters and bruises all over their body from the trek through the wilderness, they were otherwise physically okay. Because police were still worried about the letters received by the families, they wasted no time and interviewed them about what happened to them. So Carolynne started with sharing her story. According to her, while she was lying, helplessly tied up without any clothing on the ground, she would be continuing to pray, knowing that she was likely only moments from dying. However, the sounds of digging near her would stop, and it almost had sounded like her attacker had walked away, like temporarily leaving her alone. Still not knowing what to do, she started to struggle against her restraints for some time, but couldn't seem to free herself. She knew that it was a race against time, as she thought like the man who kidnapped her probably was on his way back. Luckily, some time passed, and Carolynne would hear something, and it turned out to be Julian, and it was his voice, and he was like screaming out to her.
Oh, okay.
He was also naked and tied up, but he had managed to like roll and wiggle his body.
Gotcha.
In his restraints to get closer to her. He was also able to, he said, then grab the knife that they had used to cut off the clothes.
To then cut
to
her
then
free.
cut both of them free. He kind of started with himself, and then he was able to do the same thing for her. Terrified, obviously, that the attacker was coming back.
Mm-hmm.
They only took a moment to kind of like look around and realize that they were in the middle of nowhere. So they grabbed like a sleeping bag that the attacker had left behind, as well as a couple of like food items, and ran off. And they were still both completely naked.
Okay.
Which naked and afraid, you know.
No kidding.
As the couple would wander around the woods, like Julian kind of filled Carolynne in on the details she had missed from like when he got out of the car. He said that it had all been kind of a setup, and that once he bent over to look at the animal, he heard like quick footsteps come up behind him before he was like violently struck in the back of the head.
Jesus.
He had been hit with such a force that he was knocked unconscious and had only awoken like several hours later when he began to kind of yell out for Carolynne.
Mm-hmm.
Carolynne told investigators that from there, for the next few days, they had tried desperately to like find a way out of this massive forest in the middle of Australia. But nothing with like the few meager supplies they had, they managed to steal. The temperatures like would be extremely hot during the day
and cold at night,
and so frigid at night that they like couldn't keep warm. The entire time they like lived in fear that this kidnapper would find them before they were able to find their way out. And it even got more scary when they had gotten so lost that they had turned around and basically walked back to where they had woken up.
Oh no.
And even though they were scared, Julian kind of like rushed back in and grabbed a couple more things. And then they immediately kind of ran back out into the wilderness. So finally, after almost a week, they managed to find their way out of the forest and onto that road where they would then like flag down for help. When police interviewed Julian, he reiterated the same details that Carolynne told him, minus the parts that he was unconscious.
Sure.
So, based on the details, investigators kind of decided that the best way forward would be to try and track down the site where the couple had initially been taken in the forest, in the hopes that this would yield more clues. Amazingly, they were able to do just that. So they found the campsite, and during the search of the site, they recovered a shovel, duct tape bits, like bits of rope, and the clothing that had been cut off of both Julian and Carolynne. However, this is where things would kind of start to take a twist.
Okay.
So, as police analyzed these items that they recovered there, they would determine that all of them belonged to none other than Julian. So, before this, investigators had noticed a couple inconsistencies in the version of events that Julian had provided to them. The biggest one among these was the place where he had like been claimed that he was looking at this dead animal and got hit. This place barely showed any signs that there was like
another person,
a struggle there.
Sure.
If you think you get like knocked out cold, they're gonna have to drag you at some point, and there was like not really any marks in the dirt. So they'd go back and start like really pushing Julian and questioning. And Julian would eventually crack, admitting that he had been behind the entire thing.
Oh,
isn't he fun?
What a creep.
I know. Well, it gets worse. Don't worry. According to him, he was the one who planted like the black clothing and the gloves and the lava, and he used those to like dress up as this attacker
and attack his girlfriend
to commit the crime. He had also made those notes and put them by his family to make it seem like a cult was responsible for their disappearances. He made up the excuse about the animal carcass so he could pull off to the side of the road without like drawing suspicion, which like, girl, if he's pulling off to like a dead animal, be suspicious.
Is your red flag.
Oh. and he pulled up far enough that he would be out of sight so he could like change his clothes.
Gotcha. And then he's the one that was sprinting back to her and then fucking drug her out of the car.
Duct taped her and hog-tied her. Isn't that fun?
And then cut her clothes off.
Yeah, correct. Once Julian, then he like threw her back in their car. Once he drove them to Alpine National Park, he dug a hole where he buried several things that would have kind of given away his involvement in the crime. So that's the digging she heard. Not the digging of her own grave, the digging of where he was hiding all his evidence. Oh, it's so nice. He had also hidden his vehicle in the woods so that they would be able to use it to drive to safety later on after everything was...
So he made her walk around for a week.
Yes. After everything was hidden, he cut off his own clothing and tied himself up and then began like calling out to Carolyn as if he had just woken up.
God.
Yeah.
Men.
So the weird decision of the kidnapper, like leaving them alone with a few supplies, was just like what Julian brought with him to make sure that they wouldn't like starve or freeze to death. What a guy. However, he was careful to like not make them too comfortable, to, like raise suspicions. So he made sure to leave them naked, as this was like the crux of his plan. So it turned out that while he and Carolyn had planned to get married, there was a disagreement on when they would get married. So Julian wanted to get married right away. He was like, I'm getting so old, marry me. And Carolyn wanted to finish school and get their lives kind of started. While like normally this seems like a non-issue, it was a huge issue for Julian because, believe it or not, he's a good Christian boy and believed he couldn't have sex until marriage.
So he just wanted to take away her like innocence by stripping her naked and hog-tying her.
Yeah. Well, yeah. However, like, yeah, since they were so religious.
And just trying to trauma bond.
And yeah, any sort of physical relationship was out of the question until they got married. This is where his incredibly warped and awful, awful plan kind of came to life. By leaving them nude and exposed to the elements and fearful that they were going to die, he hoped that he could pressure Caroline into quote-unquote sex, consummating their relationship. That is what he said, quote-unquote.
So he did all of this to fuck her.
Correct. Apparently over the course of like all those days, Julian had continually brought up the subject, using all manner of excuses he could think of to like get Carolyn to agree.
So they're running through the woods. She's like, I just escaped this psycho. And he's like, we should have sex.
Yeah. He allegedly said that they were about to die, so they might as well as leave the world, essentially be married in the eyes of God, and even suggested that getting physical would be necessary to keep them warm.
You know, I hate it. I hate it. Keep going.
Carolyn, though, was absolutely not fucking having it.
Good for her.
She was like, my morals could never. I would rather die a virgin than like have sex with you. She kept saying to him, like, God will get us out of this situation. You're losing faith, blah, blah, blah. As disturbing as this whole shit is, he even got more chilling because Julian admitted to investigators that among the supplies that he had stashed before, like, carrying out the kidnapping and everything, was a map of the park. So this meant that he and Carolyn had never really been lost.
He knew where he was going.
Instead, he had just purposely kept them walking around in circles, hoping that he could eventually wear Carolyn down. Knowing the entire time that she genuinely believed that they were being hunted by some unknown kidnapper who planned on, like, killing them.
Jesus.
Julian only led them out of the forest after it became clear that she was not gonna cave.
No shit.
And that he, like, wasn't gonna get what he wanted. So after his confession, he got slapped with a number of charges, and in August of 2009, he was convicted of kidnapping and making a false report. Now, mind you, this is Australia, not the United States. Okay? This was not quite the end of Julian's story, believe it or not. So it turns out that he was like 23 at this point. He was granted bail.
Let's all think of this is also to a minor.
Yeah.
Oh, oh God. Okay, sorry, continue.
That's okay.
I forgot that she was
17.
underage. On top of this,
So he was granted bail ahead of his sentencing, meaning that he wouldn't officially be ever taken into custody until his sentence would be given to him. So, because he is who he is and he makes horrible decisions, he decided to make one last attempt for freedom. So just before he was supposed to be sentenced in September of 2009, he obtained an Indian passport and boarded a flight for the city of Chennai. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that.
that's fine.
Reports kind of can't be told if it's a real passport and he just stuck his face on it, or if it was a fake. But most believe that it was actually a real passport. But he then doctored it with his own picture. In this picture, Julian dyes his hair black and covered himself with as much fake tan as he could to darken his skin, thinking that it would make him look more Indian. Mind you, this is a dude from Australia who's white as hell with blonde hair and blue eyes. So this guy was absolutely ridiculous. In the picture, he has this rough middle part. He's slicked it down, and it looks insane. But unbelievably, he would get through the airport officials of Australia with this disguise. Don't worry, he gets to India and they're like, "You are not.
You're a liar.
This is bad." So they immediately detained Julian upon entry into the country and was sent back. Perfect. So he would be arrested by Australian authorities in Singapore. They're going to send him all the way back to China. Mm-hmm. And investigators believe that India was only supposed to be a stop along his route, and that he had intended to go to Germany, where he had some family. So even though, in another weird twist, he was returned to Australia and given a 7-year and 3-month sentence for the kidnapping, plus an additional 6 months for fleeing while on bail.
I feel
not enough.
Needed more time than that.
Like I said, this is where I tell you, remember, this is Australia, not the United States. Their judicial system different than ours. All right.
There's no rehabilitating this man.
No kidding. Germany is reportedly where he would have ultimately ended up. So Julian's family had actually moved to Australia when he was 1 year old and actually was born in Germany, and never got Australian citizenship, despite having basically spent his whole life there. And as a result, he was still in jail in 2014. The Immigration and Border Protection Department notified Julian that his permanent resident visa was under review. So, though Julian tried several times to fight, having his visa canceled, according to sources, he was unsuccessful, and in 2016 would be deported to Germany.
Lovely.
So he is just a wonderful guy. Apparently, reports say that he only speaks English, has no German friends, and has no career prospects in the country.
Love that.
So just unbelievably wild. So both of them are still living. He is now out of prison, and she has done some interviews and is a full adult now. But yeah, that is the kind of twisty-turny case of Carolynne Watson and Julian Buchwald. I don't know. Buchwald? Buchwald.
This story is the prime example of would you rather be in the woods with a bear or a man? And every woman picks a fucking bear, because you know what? The bear wouldn't chase you down in your car, duct tape your mouth, hog tie you, drive you 6 hours away,
and then keep you lost in a forest for a week
over sex,
over wanting to bang you, and then deciding well, I guess she's never going to give it in, so I guess I'll let her go.
Like, go sleep with somebody else.
Also, like, I'm sorry. Also, this is just warped. Because, like, I'm not saying him, like, sexually assaulting her would be good either. But, like, if you're that desperate, don't you think you just, like, would do that? Instead, he psychologically tormented her for a week. And this poor girl, this whole time, is like, I'm not sleeping with you. And he's like, I don't understand. Sleep with me. What if we die? God would want this. It's like, master manipulator. What a creep. I know, I read that and I was like, Jesus Christ.
Nothing will make me understand the thoughts behind this man.
I don't think there's logic behind it.
But, like, I honestly feel like there's a reason why he only had a 3 p.m. curfew. It's because his parents knew that there was something wrong with him.
It just was such a, like, unbelievable, like, how did you make that decision at that moment in time? Also, like, dude, you've waited 22 years. Wait 1 more year! Like, she was willing to marry you once she graduated high school.
Right.
The poor girl.
Oh,
also, your parents need to fucking get it in check. If your 15-year-old says, I love him, and he's 20,
no.
Run.
Uh-huh.
That is a pedophile.
Yeah, that's just fucked up.
Oh. This is them when he was 22 and she was 17. So this is what he looked like. And then I'll show you his passport.
Oh, God.
Oh, let's see if I can find it. Oh, this is good for audio. If I can find it, I will. No, that was it. It just chunked
We'll
away.
put it on our Twitter, and so you can see.
Yeah, I just is so unbelievable.
Wow. Well, you know, I don't know where we really take this episode after that. You know, ladies,
That's what he did.
Oh my God, he looks awful.
He just looks more red than he looks like darker melanin complected.
Yeah.
And I just want to know who was like, nope, that looks good. That looks great. 100%. You look Indian. Well, again, like, you can live in India and not be Indian. I don't know why you would try and change your appearance.
Yeah, that's stupid. I don't know.
A lot of questions. This man makes horrible decisions. And I hope he got a lot of therapy and is doing.
I hope she got therapy. I don't give a fuck about him.
Why? But he's back out in public.
I hope he is as much of a creep as everyone can see, and they stay far away from him, and he has no friends because he can't speak German. And I hope she is doing well.
I hope she's doing great. Yeah, no, I know. You can look up what she's up to now, but she's done interviews on the case and things like that. But I can't imagine ever dating anybody again. How do you trust anyone when you're like, yeah, also, like, what a first date story. Like, oh, yeah, me and my
Two truths and a lie. You know, I was just walking into the woods for a week thinking I was about to get murdered because my ex-boyfriend wanted to have sex with me.
Like, oh, fun.
Also, dude, there's so many other options.
He's a good religious boy, Hannah. He also didn't want to have sex with her without consent or before marriage unless it was in the woods. Also, can you imagine the thought process of being like, you know what'll make her want to have sex with me? If we're both naked.
That, and like, just say,
in the woods, running for your life.
We're running for your life. She's like, yep, let's do it. Then what? What's the next step? Oh, okay, we're good. We can go home now.
Let's go that way. I feel like there's a road. Like, what the hell, dude? Yeah, that story shook me. Shook me to my car. Poor Carolyn. I wish you all the best.
Same. Well, that's going to wrap up our show for today. If you like what you hear, definitely follow us on our socials at I don't think so _EH, or check us out on YouTube at IDTS Conspiracies. We'll post our lovely passport photo on there, and we will see you guys next week.
Bye.